Hello, this is Ben Television News Roundup, a compilation of major stories in the weekend. I'm Tunde Alabi, and thank you for being part of the program today. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has accused the government of taking opportunities and limiting life chances of hundreds of thousands of children from poorer or middle-income families. As a result of the cut in tax credit, Mr. Corbyn stated this at the Prime Minister's question time, where he also accused the government of not doing enough to encourage the construction of social housing.
I want to ask the Prime Minister a question about tax credits. I've had 2,000 people email me in the last 3 days offering a question to the Prime Minister on tax credits. I'll choose just one. Kelly writes, I'm a single mum to a disabled child. I work 40.5 hours each week in a job that I trained for. I get paid £7.20 per hour. So in April, the Prime Minister is not putting my wage up, but he'll be taking tax credits off me. So my question is, can the Prime Minister tell us how much worse off Kelly will be next year?
Well, first of all, let me welcome what the Honourable Gentleman has said and join him in what he said about the terrible bomb that took place in Ankara, where over 100 people were killed, and our thoughts should be with those families of those that suffered, and also with that country as it struggles against this terrorism. Let me answer very directly on the issue of tax credits. What we're doing is bringing in the national living wage, which will be a £20 a week pay rise for people next year. Obviously, Kelly will benefit as that national living wage rises to £9. Hold on. Sorry, what happened to the new approach? I thought we were questions asked so that they could be responded to. Right, so there's the introduction of the national living wage, which will reach £9 by the end of the Parliament, which will benefit Kelly. Also in April next year, we raise to £11,000 the amount of money that you can earn before you start paying taxes. And also, Kelly, if she has children, will be benefiting from the 30 hours of childcare that we're bringing in. In addition to that, there's also the point that if Kelly, and I don't know all her circumstances, but if she is a council house or housing association tenant, we're cutting her rents. All those things are important, as is the increase in employment and the increase in wages taking place today.
I thank the Prime Minister for that. Can I tell him, in case he's not aware of it, that she's going to be £1,800 a year worse off next April? And that there are another 3 million families in this country who will also be worse off next April, and that after housing costs, 500,000 more children are now in poverty compared with 5 years ago in 2010. And on top of that, his new tax credit policy will put another 200,000 children into poverty. Isn't the truth of the matter that this government is taking away the opportunities and limiting the life chances of hundreds of thousands of children from poorer or middle-income families in this society? And should he not be aware of that in the decisions he makes?
Well, the fact is that since I became Prime Minister, there are 480,000 fewer children in households where nobody works. There are 2 million more people in work. There are almost 1 million more women in work. There are 250,000 more young people in work. The best route out of poverty is to help people get a job. And that's why, even though the unemployment figures came out today, and we see 140,000 more people in work, he still hasn't welcomed the fall in unemployment that took place today. But the point he needs to focus on is this, is that all these people benefit from a growing economy where wages are rising, where inflation is falling, and where we're getting rid of our deficit to create economic stability. And it's that stability that we'll be voting on in the lobbies tonight.
The Prime Minister is doing his best, and I admire that, but could he not tell us something else? That the reality is people in work often do rely on tax credits to make ends meet. His party and himself have put forward a budget which cuts tax credits, gives tax breaks to the very wealthiest in our society. So inequality is getting worse, not better. Should he not think for a moment about the choices that he's making and the reality it is for the very poorest people in our society?
Well, the honourable gentleman talks about the reform of tax credits, and let me tell him why it is necessary. Between 1998 and 2010, the bill for tax credits went from 6 billion to 30 billion, and yet at the same time, in-work poverty went up by 20%. The system of taking money away from people and giving it back to them in tax credits wasn't working. We say it's better to let people earn more and then take less from them in taxes. And what we have in this country is 2 million more people in work. Now, the figures he quotes for inequality are simply wrong. There are 800,000 fewer people in relative poverty than 2010. There are 300,000 fewer children in relative poverty in 2010. And if he wants to know why, it's because we took difficult decisions to get our deficit down, get our economy growing, and deliver the strongest growth anywhere in the Western world. Now, tonight the Labour Party has a choice. A week ago, they were committed to getting the deficit down and running a surplus just like us. But for some reason, I know not why, they've decided to do a 180-degree turn and vote for more borrowing forever. Is that now the position of the Labour Party?
Corbyn! The reality is that 3 million low and middle income families are going to be worse off as a result of the tax credit changes. And if the Prime Minister wants to change his mind on tax credits, he's very welcome to do that. There'll be an opportunity next week when there's going to be an Opposition Day debate on this very subject. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will want to take part in that debate and explain why it's such a good idea to make so many people so much worse off. I'd also like to tell him I've had 3,500 questions on housing in the last few days. And I just want to say this. A question from Matthew. This might be funny to some members, but it's not funny to Matthew or many others. Matthew says, I live in a private rented house in London with 3 other people. Despite earning a salary well over the median wage, buying even the cheapest of properties is well beyond my reach for years to come. Does the Prime Minister think it's fair that and does he really believe that £450,000 is actually an affordable price for a new home for somebody on an average income to try and aspire to?
First of all, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right to raise the issue of housing, particularly the affordability of housing in London. And what I would say to Matthew is that we are doing everything we can to get councils to build more houses, particularly affordable houses that he can buy. Now, the honourable gentleman quotes the figure of £450,000 because what we're saying is that should be the upper limit for a starter home in London. We want to see starter homes in London built for £150,000, at £200,000, so that people like Matthew can stop renting and start buying. Now, what have we done for people like Matthew? Well, obviously, we've introduced Help to Buy. So for the first time, we're actually helping to get people their deposit together so they can buy a new home. We're also giving people like Matthew the right to buy the housing association home. And we've now got, well, that's interesting. We hear groans from the Labour Party, but of course the entire housing association movement is now backing our plan and saying people should be able to buy their home. So I would say to the honourable gentleman, let us work together and get London building to get prices down so people like Matthew can afford to buy a home of their own.
Could I bring the Prime Minister back to reality? The last 5 years have seen a low level of house building, less than half the new buildings that are actually needed. It's seen rapidly rising rents, rising homelessness, therefore also a higher housing benefit bill, and even the CBI, his friends at the CBI, say we need to be building at least 240,000 homes per year. Will he now address the problem that local authorities face in accessing funds in order to undertake the necessary and essential building of council housing, rather than what appears to be a growing obsession in the government to selling off publicly owned properties rather than building homes for people that desperately need them so that children can grow up in a safe, secure environment, which is what we all want for all of our children?
Well, let me deal with all his points in turn. Of course, first of all, now that the Housing Association movement is backing the right to buy, that will mean up to 1 million extra homeowners, with that money going back into building more homes. That's the first point. The second point on council housing. In the last 5 years, when I was Prime Minister, we built more council homes than the last Labour government built in 13 years. But the most important point, that's a bit of reality for the honourable gentleman, he might want to digest, but the most important point is this: if we want to build homes, we need a strong and stable economy. We're not going to have a strong and stable economy if we adopt the new Labour position, which is borrowing money forever. So I would urge members opposite who believe in a strong economy, paying down our deficit, making sure we deliver for working people, to join us in the lobbies tonight.
Ahead of the U.S. presidential elections in 2016, frontrunners Hillary Clinton and main rival Bernie Sanders have clashed over Middle East gun control and economic policy. However, Mr. Sanders rose in defense of Hillary Clinton over the issue of our controversial email practices.
Now it's time to meet.
The debate featured an unexpected moment of agreement between frontrunner Hillary Clinton and her main challenger, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who's been surging in the polls. The issue was the lingering controversy over Clinton's use of a private email account while Secretary of State.
Let me say something that may not be great politics, but I think the Secretary is right. And that is that the American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails.
Thank you. Me too. Me too.
Enough of the emails. Let's talk about the real issues facing America.
But there was sharp disagreement on what the U.S. should do about Syria in the wake of Russian intervention.
And I think it's important, too, that the United States make it very clear to Putin that it's not acceptable for him to be in Syria, creating more chaos, bombing people on behalf of Assad.
And I will do everything that I can to make sure that the United States does not get involved in another quagmire like we did in Iraq, the worst foreign policy blunder in the history of this country.
A different view from former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley.
I would not be so quick to pull for a military tool. I believe that a no-fly zone in Syria at this time, actually, Secretary, would be a mistake.
Former Rhode Island Governor Lincoln Chafee said Clinton's Senate vote in favor of the Iraq War was still a problem.
When there was no real evidence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, I know because I did my homework.
Former Virginia Senator Jim Webb had another foreign policy priority.
But if you want a place where we need to be in terms of our national strategy of focus, the greatest strategic threat that we have right now is resolving our relationship with China.
There was also a sharp split on gun control when Clinton accused Sanders of protecting gun manufacturers.
That he was going to give immunity to the only industry in America. Everybody else has to be accountable, but not the gun manufacturers. And we need to stand up and say enough of that. We're not going to let it continue.
We're going to bring you all in on this, but Senator Sanders, you have to be able to respond.
As a senator from a rural state, what I can tell Secretary Clinton, that all the shouting in the world is not going to do what I would hope all of us want, and that is keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have those guns and end this horrible violence that we are seeing.
Little was said about Vice President Joe Biden, who's expected to decide soon if he will join the Democratic race.
Turkey has warned the US and Russia against supplying military hardware to Kurdish forces in Syria. In its latest reactions, Turkey accused the Kurdish forces of being allies of the Kurdish terrorists in Turkey. And Ridgewell has the report.
Backed by US-led coalition airstrikes, Kurdish forces in Syria have made territorial gains against Islamic State militants. The United States said this week it had airdropped ammunition into Syria, but did not specify which rebel groups it is aiding. Turkey has warned against arming Kurdish forces in Syria, which it views as terrorists allied to PKK, Kurdish separatists in Turkey.
This stance was communicated to the United States and Russia. It means Turkey cannot accept any cooperation with groups that are waging a war against Turkey.
But the alliance between the West and Kurdish leaders in Syria, known as the PYD, is likely to strengthen.
They've constituted a very effective pro-Western secular force fighting ISIS, and at a time like this, with the Russians intervening, with the conflict getting more and more complicated, I think the US and the West in general will keep the PYD on side.
Kurdish commanders told Reuters they had formed an alliance with Arab rebel groups to launch an assault on the Islamic State's self-proclaimed capital, Raqqa. A short-term alliance is likely, says Al-Aldin.
Given that they do have a common goal, and that is the end and the defeat of ISIS, but I'm not that optimistic when it comes to the longer or the bigger scheme of things, given that these are groups that in the past have been in confrontation with one another. They're very much at odds in terms of what future Syria might look like.
Ethnic rivalries mean a Kurdish-led assault on Raqqa would be problematic.
In Arab-dominated parts, there would be considerable opposition to the Kurdish militia controlling their towns, even if it meant getting rid of IS, because there are deep-rooted tensions there between the communities.
Turkey fears Kurdish groups in Syria aim to push further west along the border over the Euphrates River, aided by Russian air support.
I think the Turks would like to have the freedom to attack inside Kurdish parts of Syria, but I don't think they currently do. The wider alliances with international powers makes that very awkward, because they cannot be seen to be striking one of the few forces on the ground which does have popular support and does have a measure of legitimacy, who has been successful against Islamic State.
Meanwhile, Turkey said Wednesday it has evidence linking Kurdish PKK militants and Islamic State terrorists to Saturday's bomb attack on a peace rally in Ankara. Many Kurdish groups claim the Turkish state was behind the attack, a claim the government has strongly denied.
In the meantime, Amnesty International has accused Western-backed Kurdish forces of forcibly ejecting and destroying the villages occupied by mainly Arabs in northern Syria. Northern Syria was previously under the terrorist group Islamic State until it was taken over by the Kurdish forces, who have denied all allegations against it.
The remains of the village of Husseiniya in northern Syria. Amnesty visited the site in August and found all but one of the houses destroyed and burned. Satellite imagery obtained by the group appears to show the scale of destruction. Amnesty says Kurdish military units known as the YPG, who are fighting Islamic State militants for control of northern Syria, destroyed at least 6 other villages south of the town of Suluk.
The YPG and Asayish forces would come to their village after they gained control of the village from the Islamic State, forcing them to leave their homes without giving them any prior notice, without allowing them to take their belongings with them.
Basma and her family lived in the Syrian village of Tel Diab, but were forced to flee to Turkey. She describes what happened the day the Kurdish forces arrived.
He asked me, "How long have you been building this house?" I said, "I have been building for 13 to 14 years. He said, "In an hour, there won't be anything left."
Amnesty claims thousands of people, mainly ethnic Arabs and Turkmen, have been forced to flee their homes in a campaign of collective punishment.
Some of the residents told us that there were few supporters of the Islamic State, but they had fled with the group when the YPG gained control of the areas. However, the YPG collectively punished the entire village.
The YPG deny any campaign of forced displacement.
إذن فالحل الأنسب هو إبعاد هؤلاء المدنيين من خطوط التماس إلى أن تهدأ الأوضاع أو يبعد خطر تنظيم داعش عن المنطقة على القريب. هذا لا يعني بأنه هناك تعسف أو هناك تهجير أو هناك حملات ممنهجة لإبعاد السكان الأصليين من مناطقهم. بكل تأكيد لا يوجد شيء من هذا القبيل.
But Amnesty says the people's homes were destroyed and they have little hope of returning.
Now to Africa. Kenyan government and the United Nations have said 13,000 girls drop out of school every year due to early pregnancy and poor access to contraception. A new project to give the girl child a second opportunity for education has been launched in the country, but it remains unpopular.
Early morning in Nyeri, 100 kilometers from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Today, 17-year-old Cynthia Wairimu makes her way to class. She is in her final year of primary school and will take her final exams in December. She gave birth to her daughter Eunice last month.
My hopes are to determine my future and to achieve my goals so that I can be a better person and be more serious in my studies and improve so that I can be respectable later.
Cynthia is part of the Pick Me Up program that has helped more than 100 teen mothers finish school since it started in Kenya 2 years ago. The government and the United Nations say that every year 13,000 girls leave school early in Kenya due to pregnancy. Lack of education and little or no access to contraception drive the high rate of teen pregnancy. Hawa Wangeshi mentors 20 teen mothers, many of whom face stigma and poverty.
Getting the teen mothers is the biggest challenge since they're afraid to come out and seek help and counsel to go back to school. Secondly, they're poor and getting resources to get back into school is difficult.
Pick Me Up is funded by members who contribute $10 a month.
The government has not yet introduced sex education in schools. So this initiative is meant to empower the girl child, the school-going girl child, so that we can be able to fill in the gaps and make this world a better place to live.
Finishing school increases a girl's future earning potential, which can mean a better life for both her and her child.
This is all we have for you on News Round of the Street. Thank you for being part of it. I'm today Alabi. Do have a very, very beautiful week ahead of you. Bye. As part of our continued efforts to reach the African and other ethnic communities in the United Kingdom with greater impacts and create the platform to hear your silent and unheard views in this hugely growing community in the United Kingdom, our channel, Ben TV, presents to you another live current affairs television program. Our focus on the program is to review and discuss issues around the diaspora community in the UK. The program offers you that unrestricted voice on issues affecting you in the UK. Join us live every Monday at 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Another business segment of Dialogue in Diaspora, 2 to 3 p.m. every Monday. But guess what? You know you can be part of the program. Just send us an email at bentelevisionuk@gmail.com. Dialogue in Diaspora, your voice, your opinion on our TV.